You are listening to Peterborough Politics Podcast, aka PTBO Polypod, with your hosts, Danny Taro and Seabass,
Seabass.
which has become the official name, maybe, of Sebastian Johnston-Lindsay. This is our fifth episode. So we have officially lasted longer than the majority of like bro podcasts that get started just out of general interest. And I think we've done great so far.
Yeah, I think so. I think we're holding our own. I mean, we had a
Yeah,
counselor on last week, so I mean, we're making serious progress in that respect.
exactly. And Marit Stiles, the leader of the NDP, even liked my tweet
There we
yesterday
go.
trying to
Yes.
ask people like what we should be talking about on the show. So I feel like we are getting, we've been recognized at the municipal level, the provincial level, and it's just a matter of time before we get someone at the federal level and then internationally, maybe we could get like Vladimir
Yeah.
Putin on the pod
Y-
to tell
Yeah.
us how, you
One can
know,
dream when he's arrested and put in
that,
jail. Yeah.
yes, that's
Um,
right. That's right.
well, we do have on the docket today, we do have a federal person here that we're going to be talking about. So maybe this will get her attention, you know?
That is
It's a
true. That is
possibility.
true.
It's a
I did
possibility.
tag Michelle Ferreri in my Twitter post as well. Unlike Marit Stiles,
Yeah.
she didn't like it or do anything, but that's probably because her Twitter account is hacked.
Was going to say she has a
Um,
pretty good reason for not liking
yeah,
something right now.
you know,
She might not have
she hasn't
access to it.
she hasn't liked any of my tweets before. Especially when I'm directly commenting on her. But that I can definitely understand why, because we are pretty much opposite spectrum of the political spectrum. So yeah, did you hear about this Michelle Ferreri hack?
I did, yeah. I heard about it last week, and then I see it's kind of funny because it's like Joelle was off last week for most of last week, and so there was like very little news coming out of the Examiner, which I think is very telling
Yes.
about like how much we depend upon the work of like a very specific reporter at the biggest newspaper in our area. Um, However, yeah, I did see that she wrote an article on Monday about this, and I'd heard about it before too. I think I'd seen something about people were tweeting about it on. Now I'm on Twitter, right? As it's an occupational hazard, but I'm on there now, so I see things, and I did learn that. I don't know if it's exactly been rectified to this point. I don't really know where it stands. I could just see here that the statement coming out of her office is, should you need to contact MPP Ferrari or MP for Ferrari on the issues that matter most, please get in touch with our office, and they give her actual email address. So like, don't 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 contact your MP through Twitter and expect them to do something. I think that's probably a good rule, like overall. I feel like
Yeah,
that it shouldn't take hacking to remind people that to reach out to their MPs through like actual channels, but regardless. Maybe I'm just a
that is
snob.
right.
Maybe I just really don't like
Yeah.
Twitter.
I mean, nobody likes Twitter, but we just use it all the time, though. That's part of the problem. And Michelle
It's true.
Ferreri is actually quite active on Twitter when she's not actively hacked. The weird part is that her account went from retweeting Pierre Polyev all the time to retweeting Twitter Blue, the
Right.
official like Twitter Blue account. I think, I don't know. It's hard to know what's an
Yes.
official account on Twitter these days, but
Yes.
it has a yellow check mark, and it's like for some reason this hacker might have a vested interest in signing people up for Twitter's pay to play service, where you get more engagement by paying $8 a month to Elon Musk. So I mean, the most obvious person who might have hacked this so far is Elon Musk himself.
Wouldn't that be something? Wouldn't that be very interesting if Elon
I
Musk hacked Michelle Ferrari's Twitter
I
or
think that would be a
one of his
really interesting
minions?
story. I mean,
Wow.
if anyone's going to sign up for Twitter Blue, which in my opinion is kind of a scam, um, it's going to be followers of the Conservative Party, because they're the most kind of like, I don't know, the libs are trying to take over social media. and we need to take it back by paying Elon Musk $8 a month till the end of time. So I don't know. There's definitely a market there to that could be exploited, and that seems to be what's at play here.
Yeah. No, it's a fascinating little story in a lot of respects. Because she is
Yeah,
such an online presence, right? I mean, she's I've called her some names in print that I'm not going to repeat here, but people could go and read those. Um, but she does have a propensity to like post videos of herself online. She's a very extremely online individual in
yes,
certain ways, and so
it is true.
it couldn't have happened to a better person.
I
Um,
do wonder too, like what was the security breach? And I think probably the question that is on everyone's mind is that is this the Chinese Communist Party also trying to do more election interference and by signing
that
up people to Twitter Blue?
now that possibility does exist. Maybe this is the real election interference. Maybe the
Yeah,
CSIS, I hasten to call him a whistleblower, but the CSIS leaker was uh yeah, maybe that was all distraction from the real ways in which our elections are going to be interfered with. But there is some interesting like security aspects to this too, because she's a public official, right? And like
yeah.
if her Twitter is being hacked, I mean that doesn't exactly bode well for like. I mean, this is what I mean. Like, I would like to think that if someone wanted to reach out to their MP through official channels, that there would be more security, right? But I mean, at this point, I mean, I imagine this person has like access to like DMs and stuff like that, right? I don't know. Who knows?
Right. I didn't even think about
And
that.
like
Like,
personal details of constituents to a certain degree, or like issues and like things that she's dealing with. Like, there's, I don't know, the
yeah.
correspondence between MPs and constituents. You'd like to think that that's not that easily accessible. I mean, you'd like to think that you'd be able to get some of it, especially speaking from a journalistic point of view. But like,
Yeah, it seems like that Michelle Ferrer is getting really lucky here that this person doesn't seem to have like malicious intent from a political point of view
yes,
because they just seem to be trying to sell Twitter Blue subscriptions. But like, yeah, it's you're right. There's like potential messages or something behind the scenes that this could be a breach. The funny part too is that conservatives are not allowed to have TikTok on their phone. I mean, no government officials are allowed to have TikTok on their work device, but also conservatives are not allowed to on their personal phone. Right now, also like Google and Facebook, they're considering pulling out of like sharing news and stuff. So it's like almost like all of these social media apps are potentially having a conflict with our governments for one reason or another. Twitter seems to be the most friendly, but I guess now that Michelle's account is hacked, maybe not so.
yeah, it'll be interesting to see too, like if there's any others, especially in Canadian politics. I mean, it's kind of a fraught time, in terms of like our security and at an all-time peak in terms of like concerns about political interference, especially from outside sources, not either whether they're um, nations as in China or if it's corporations, right? And especially in terms of access to information as well. I mean, there's an article coming out in Arthur written by, I think if Robert's in the chat, hey Robert, shout out to Robert for his coverage of the C18 stuff. Like it's that access to information is and concerns about the spread of disinformation. Um, yeah, it all kind of comes together in a really sort of insidious way, whether it's coming from like official nation state intelligence services or if it's coming from like corporate intelligence. It's all sort of messy. It's a messy time.
Yeah, for sure. Something I've been kind of just like trying to keep an eye on and get a grasp on because I mean, to me, there's interference of our elections at like every level. And to me, the threat is not so much international as it is domestic. But we can
Mhm.
move on because we
Yeah.
got more to talk about.
We do.
Marit Stiles also paid a little visit to Peterborough on Tuesday, March 14th. We had somebody writing a special coverage of the event in Kawartha Now,
Yeah.
and that person was another maybe a double Asian, you might
A
say,
double
now that
agent.
they've
Yeah. A
they've crossed
traitor.
over away from the Arthur and into Kawartha Now. It's yourself.
Yes, it was me. It was me the whole time. Yeah, I'm just shameless, and if anyone is willing to pay me to write or meet political leaders, then I'm there. So more than happy to do that. And it was a really cool experience. That was my first time working in a freelance capacity for Kawartha now. And what a yeah, what a first story, getting to cover like a very last minute visit from Merritt Stiles, the leader of the Ontario NDP. And yeah, kind of got to sit in on a little press conference. Yeah, it was a good time. She was here doing like a tour of Eastern Ontario, just trying to drum up support for the NDP, kind of introducing herself to some of the constituents here. I mean, Peterborough was kind of a target demographic or target riding the previous municipal election, not municipal election. I just got municipal politics on the mind. Provincial election. We had Jagmeet Singh, the federal NDP leader, visit us 2 times during that. One of which led to some rather unfortunate instances of like very targeted, racially targeted violence. But yeah, so Eastern Ontario just trying to drum up support for the NDP in this area. And she was specifically here to talk about the way that the NDP intends on supporting small businesses in the area, and especially coming out of the pandemic, and sort of the ways in which government has a role to play in ensuring business and the economy can kind of flourish in a healthy, sustainable way that doesn't impinge upon the rights of workers, and ensures that they're being paid a living wage, have access to healthcare, and how all of these things are sort of interconnected. Yeah, no, it was very, very interesting. Yeah, I know it meant I had to become a traitor to Arthur, but
No. If it had been for the Examiner, we might
yeah,
label
yeah,
you
that's true.
a traitor. But
That's true.
Kawartha now is still independent journalism, is it
Yeah,
not?
it is, and it's yeah, it's openly available to anyone too, so which is good. It's not behind a paywall, and yeah, I'm not at a point in my career where I can turn down opportunities to be
Yeah,
published.
why
So
would you? And you
yeah,
totally deserve it. I mean, the
yeah,
way you've been
thanks,
covering municipal politics, I think it really shows that you have the brass to be covering stuff like this. So
thanks.
Marit
Yeah.
Stiles like really kind of like was talking about affordability. It seemed to be the main thing on her
Yeah,
agenda.
affordability and access to sort of the really, really interesting relationship, because I mean, when I was shown like the press release, like it talked about, she was talking about support for businesses, but then she tied it into the way in which there has to be a holistic approach, right? Like you can't just focus on propping businesses up. You need to also supply like basically it could be summarized by like healthy workers are um, productive, good workers and members of a community, right? So by by paying people a living wage, by supporting them and providing access to healthcare, you're going to create like a healthier community, right? Because people who are working like 60 hours a week aren't going to be able to contribute to their community in any meaningful way, right? If they're completely burnt out and unable to actually participate in anything. And so yeah, she kind of talked about just like the holistic approach that the NDP wants to take to supporting workers and businesses, and through better healthcare. Really, is how it came to. That's how I could summarize the speech. She also faced some questions about this was all unfolding. I mean, Sarah Jama, the NDP candidate who was running to replace Andrew Horwath, who's now the mayor of Hamilton, the former NDP leader in Ontario. She was successful, but this was kind of like in the last couple of days before that by-election to replace Andrea Horwath in Queen's Park. And so she faced some questions about some videos that I think you talked about on this channel. You know, allegations of anti-Semitism because of certain things that she'd said at some rallies, I guess.
Yes.
Which is always
It
always a hot
So
topic.
wait, did Marit Stiles address that specifically when she was in Peterborough?
She did, yeah. She faced questions surrounding that because I guess they just kind of surfaced, and that this had been a big story in the media in the preceding couple of days before she arrived in Peterborough. And she just said, I haven't seen that specific video, but I think we can all say that she had an interesting quote about. I don't think it made it into the story, but she said like we've all been at rallies and we've all said some things. Is basically what it boiled down to. Basically saying like
Yeah.
I don't think you can because at one point, one of the reporters, I think it was, I can't remember which one, but they asked like specifically, like apparently Sarah Jama called police Nazis or Nazi sympathizers or something like that in a video. Um,
Yes, police protect Nazism.
yes, yeah, and she just kind of shut it down and was like, I really don't think that you know this is a huge story. And then
Okay.
when I was speaking to her, like after the press conference, she said, I think that you've talked about this as well, so we might just be repeating content, but that a lot of this stuff was coming from like the Liberal Party of Canada, which is kind of not of Canada, but Ontario, sorry, um, which is kind of frustrating to see like the two quote unquote more progressive um, parties sort of infighting to such a degree when we have what we have as our current provincial government. So I guess
Yes.
things
Yes.
stay the same.
Right. And for some additional context, Sarah Jama did end up winning Hamilton Center,
Yes.
and they became the first Somali person to be part of a Canadian government. They were an activist for Palestinian rights, which many chose to interpret as is always kind of a trope at this point as anti-Semitism. Being critical of Israel gets misconstrued as being anti-Semitic, but of course, as we know, that's not really the case. You can be critical of a country. It doesn't necessarily mean you're critical of people of a certain race or religion. So I personally think the allegations against Sarah Jama were false. And being someone who watched that video, I guess I don't blame Marit Stiles for not watching that video. But the criticism was specifically of the police. And a lot of people, for some reason, misconstrued it. Almost every major media outlet, like Toronto Star, Globe and Mail, um, obviously Toronto Sun, I guess, misconstrued it as something that was anti-Semitic and critical of Israel. That was not the case. She was just being critical of the police and also the liberal status quo that uh, likes to pretend that they're progressive, but when it comes to the issue of policing, we see time and time again that they increase the police budget, even though there's never been as much attention to the defund the police or movement as there has been like right now in this point in history. So obviously that's something we see in Peterborough as well, that the police budget is increasing. And we look at something like Drag Story Time that happened over the weekend when there's a known neo-Nazi whose sign specifically is calling for genocide, and the police are standing there either doing nothing or asking the one very brave person who's holding a rainbow umbrella to block this sign that's calling for genocide, to, hey, could you not bump the Nazis sign with your umbrella? And so I think I think it could not have been more clear in the kind of examples that we saw that Sarah Jama is vindicated in her assertion that police protect Nazism. She said locally and globally, and the funny part about this all too is that neo-Nazi in Peterborough's sign was something that mirrored a very similar, almost exactly the same language as a sign that was happening in from neo-Nazis in Melbourne. I'm pretty sure it's pronounced Melbourne, Australia. So when Sarah Jama says, "Hey, police protect Nazism globally and locally," it's like there been a more clear example to be like, oh wait, this is essentially true. And obviously the police are like limited in their scope of the law, but personally I think that calling for genocide of a group of people who is facing all of this hate, I think that is against freedom of speech.
Yeah, no, that's a ton of context for sure. I didn't really go and seek out the video, and it didn't really strike me as like one of the main points to focus on in this story when I was covering her, because I mean it's difficult to not fan the flames of these kinds of things as well, right? And I mean the Toronto Star and other similar outlets were kind of already, like you said, taking it and misconstruing it and decontextualizing it to such a degree that it doesn't really necessarily need any more coverage. And she didn't really say much beyond you know Sarah's been a tremendous advocate in the Hamilton area for a decade now, and it's this,
Yeah,
you know, um, other, she's free to say what she wants, really, right?
of
And
course. And
as you
it is
said, it's
really
all borne
sad.
out. It's all borne out
Yeah,
by the facts, as you say.
right.
Yeah, globally and locally. I wasn't there on the weekend for the drag story time this time, but I have seen some some pictures and footage of the person you're referring to, and
Yeah.
unsurprisingly, the police aren't exactly stepping in, right?
It is a bit disappointing. Like either the police need to like find whatever grounds that they can arrest, I think someone, or at least get them to not wave a sign calling for genocide, or I think those laws like need to exist. Like it's getting ridiculous. Just how many of these drag story times have been protested by essentially people calling for the destruction of trans people and drag queens, and I think by extension the entire LGBTQ plus community, right? So to me it's really concerning. And the law, whether it's our politicians or our police, I think they need to figure it out. They need to do something. If Peterborough has to pass a specific law for our municipality to shut these hate rallies down, then I think that's what they should do.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, if it is just a matter of not being able to find a specific bylaw, even if it's just municipal, then yeah, perhaps that's something we should talk to our and advocate for our councillors to consider. That might be an interesting route to go down, because yeah, it is getting ridiculous, and it's getting kind of, I can't imagine what it's like for the performers and the families who want to go to these events, but people keep showing up to counter protest, and I think fewer and fewer people are showing up to protest the events too, right? Which is good. But it makes me wonder like where else they're going or what's next, Yeah, stronger
Yeah.
enforcement measures might be necessary. Yeah, I did
Yeah.
also ask, sorry.
No, go on.
Oh, I was just going to say, in following up some of the things that we talked about in previous podcasts, I asked Mary Stiles about her support for Bill 5, the Stopping Harassment and Abuse of Local Leaders Act. So that's something that Peterborough City Council has voted to send a letter to representatives of the government and Doug Ford um, to voice their support for. So this is kind of again a private member's bill ensuring that municipal officials can be held accountable if in instances of harassment. So right now, there's no way to actually remove them from office. The worst thing they can get is a certain amount of time of unpaid leave from their post. So I did ask her about that, and she didn't have a whole lot specific to say. So it's not really a story, except for the story is that she didn't really have anything specific to say, which I thought was kind of interesting coming from the leader of of one of the major parties in the Ontario legislature. So more to be followed up on that, I think, because I believe it's still in second reading at Queen's Park. But I did want to get that in there because I wanted to see, since she's in Peterborough and it was just recent news that we were our council was in support of that. Just wanted to follow up on that. Yeah.
Okay, cool. Why do you think it was like a story in so much as she didn't have much to say? Just out of curiosity.
I don't know. I thought that as the leader of the NDP, she would have more. Maybe this speaks to more of like the partisan nature of Queen's Park. That maybe I'm just wishful in my belief that just because it's coming from a liberal member, that it wouldn't that she would have more of a vested interest in passing just good legislation, despite where it might be coming from.
Hmm.
But she couldn't really speak to it in any meaningful way, which I found was kind of interesting. Um, I don't really know what that means, but I think it's noteworthy. Um, uh, yeah,
All right, interesting. We have some other news as well. One concerning the arts and one concerning the environment. So should we take a look into the Jackson Creek spill, the
yeah,
latest of the spills,
the
at
latest of
least?
the spells. Yeah, yeah. So there's
Uh,
a new article on this just this morning, right? Where it's
oh,
they
really?
seem to have. come to the maybe it was yesterday. It was yesterday morning. Yeah, it's likely coming from the Peterborough Transit Yard on Townsend Street.
Right.
I think is what they people are determining at this point, which might go some way to explaining why. I was just talking to someone about this morning that uh, it seems to happen like around the same time every year, and in this article they kind of talk about like the ways in which the temperature fluctuation might be having a role to play in determining when these leaks happen. So this that would kind of make sense given the kind of turning of the seasons at this point. But yeah, seems like a
Yeah,
little
because
bit
I
of a
do remember
mess.
a similar story happening either like a year or two ago. So yeah, it is weird that this is a recurring thing. I can't really say I understand, or I'm not sure if anyone understands like how this oil is being released as a result of the thawing weather. But that seems to be like the conclusion that the Ministry of Environment, Conservation and Parks is coming to here. So an oil sheen has developed. I guess it's from diesel fuel. I guess maybe that is part of the indication that is coming from transit.
Yeah,
If those buses run on diesel, I'm actually not sure. And I mean, the good news is that this is supposedly not something that is affecting the municipal water, as drinking water is drawn out of the Autonomy River from upstream of Jackson Creek and is treated before going into homes. So obviously that is like good news that this isn't getting directly into the potable water supply.
yeah, yeah. And I think that when this was first being reported on last week, and I still haven't seen any press release directly from the city. Like I heard there would be one coming out, but yeah, I mean, I guess we can rest easy in that regard. But I think there's still some warnings for people who are downstream um, along the river, whose water might be coming more directly out of the autonomy. But yeah, not a great story. But yeah,
I wonder, like, what I guess, like, we're kind of left to speculate, like, how does it get from the train yard, or sorry, the not the train yard. I wish we had a train yard, the bus yard, um, into the water. Like, are they dumping fuel? Is this from like a long time ago practice? Is this why is it reoccurring? I don't know. I just have so many questions, but maybe
yeah.
we just don't have answers for it
I
yet.
mean, I could picture it in my mind, and so I did end up looking at it on a map, and I mean, it is quite close. It's right by like down by the Holiday Inn there, right? Where like I think this is all being noticed and set up. And yeah, I'm curious if it's just coming through like some kind of like sewer or something like that. Like there's some underground crack in some sort of infrastructure. I know too, like that there's been a lot of construction in and around that area recently as well. Um, so who
Okay.
knows? Who knows? It's been kind
Maybe.
of torn up for a while, I think.
Okay, yeah, right. It's funny because I also looked at a map. That was like, I'm like, oh, Townsend, that's like close to where the leak is, right? And it's like, okay, yeah, it's literally just like right down the street.
Yeah, yeah, it's like
Um,
100 yards down the street. Yeah,
yeah, so I guess that does in a way make sense. I do wonder if maybe instead of fueling the buses, they're just pouring that right down the sewer because that's why we have all these bus cancellations. Because
I hope not. I hope it's not. I hope it's not rogue transit employees deliberately polluting the water in
yeah,
protest.
I
That'd
really
be like
hope
throwing.
not.
That'd be as like throwing cans of soup at paintings. I think that'd be almost as effective.
Hey, you know what? I think throwing cans of soup at paintings was pretty effective. All right. The fact
Okay,
that we're still talking about it
that's true.
is kind of relevant, right?
That's right. Any news is good. Is any notoriety is good.
Yes,
That's
that's
true.
right. And I mean, luckily they were able to clean up majority of this bill. I think
Yeah.
there were some videos of like sucking the
Yes.
diesel off of the water. They also contained it with like some sort of barrier. So obviously this is not ideal, but at least it was being addressed. I think they worked through the night in order to clean it up. I was a bit disappointed that like they didn't do a controlled burn. Like
Mm.
the train crash over in Ohio. I felt like they should just like light a match and like just blow up Little Lake, you know. But I'm
Why not?
glad.
I'm,
Yeah,
sh-
well,
I'm
yeah,
sure.
that's the
Yeah,
American way.
yeah.
Um, yeah, people in
We're-
chat are saying too soon to be to make this joke, but
it was
you know, we're up
been
here
a
in, you know,
solid
communist
spectacle.
Canada
Yeah,
where
yeah. We're not gonna
we
burn.
don't blow up the lake in order to save the
Yeah,
environment.
we're
So,
gonna use boring things like suction, no fire. Uh,
yeah,
give it
yeah,
5 years, and that'll be our environmental approach when Pierre
yeah.
Poilievre is prime
I
minister.
mean, yeah, it just feels like the world is burning all around us. And, you
Yeah,
know, sometimes I just wish we had that pathetic
right.
fallacy
Yeah,
of like
like
actually having the world burn.
it would be cool to yeah, to like add life to like everything's metaphorically burning all around us all the time. It'd be cool if something was actually literally um
Exactly. Yeah.
burning and we had like a little bit of control over it, but I could just see like this just going nuts and like half the downtown burning down because we, set fire to Jackson Creek. Because it wouldn't stop. It would go right up through
Oh, yeah.
all the
It'd be
way.
like a tourist destination. It'd be like people would come and see like, hey, that's where the fire was.
Yeah,
You
it's
know?
just
Or sorry, still is, because it would be like ongoing, you
see,
know?
yeah, see the best
Like,
part is like obviously the leak hasn't been stopped, right? We're just cleaning up the leak that has transpired.
yes.
Things are still
That
going
would
to keep leaking, right? So
right.
there's like a constant supply. It'll be like the eternal flame of Peterborough, Ontario. It'll just be the
Wouldn't
creek's
I
on
guess
fire.
yeah, technically probably it would mean that the bus depot would like blow up. It would be it would, like the fire would
It would.
eventually go
It,
all
it
the
would.
way back there.
Yeah. Yeah. It would. It would
Okay.
definitely back up. The
Okay.
flames would back up,
All
and
right. Well, I mean
all
that
of
would save
Townsend Street.
city council the trouble of trying to blow up the transit system. They could just literally do it.
You could just literally do it and start from scratch. Yeah.
That's
And
right.
then
Yeah.
and then and then
So,
maybe if that depot gets destroyed, then maybe they can build a new arena there. Like I've seen some.
oh yeah.
They've been
We
thinking of like ripping down that whole because we want an arena in downtown, right?
we do need that. We do
Yeah,
need that. We
where the,
where there's like a
where there's
shortage
tons of
of hockey
parking.
rinks for
Yeah,
sure.
and there isn't one just 5 minutes down the road. Five
All
minute
right,
walk
enough.
down the road. Anyways,
Yeah,
anyways, ugh.
enough joking around. This is a very serious podcast. All right, and
What is this
sadly,
serious
there are
podcast?
trees coming down at Morrow Park to make way for the new Peterborough's twin pad arena. So, I
Mm.
mean, as much as we joke about some arenas getting put up, this is something that has been reported on just yesterday, actually. So, sadly, they are going through and, you know, cutting down some beautiful old trees in order to build a arena. I think it's going to be what swimming and hockey and something that is going against what Morrow Park was supposed to be allocated for, which was agricultural activities. So that is again just like really disappointing that we're
Mhm.
destroying nature for something that you know we arguably do not need, and do we need it exactly there? I don't know, but I am a bit disappointed, and I mean, not really anyone's fault, but I do wish that there was some sort of opposition to this development of Morrow Park, because I know that we saved another park. Some activists were able to save, what is it called? The park near Park Hill Bridge from being developed into a fire station.
But in really,
But yes, Inverleigh. There was like Friends of Inverleigh Park, and I do feel like the kind of this is possibly the issue that could galvanize a lot of the activist community in Peterborough, because we could say, hey, we don't want you to build this monstrosity of a building because this is supposed to be agricultural land, and not only that, but we know how much money goes to development, and those resources need to go elsewhere, whether it's for the unhoused, or the opioid epidemic, or healthcare. You know, I would much if they told me that, hey, we're putting a walk-in clinic there, I might be like, you know what, okay, go ahead, do it, you know? And but they're not. It's a place for, let's face it, privileged folks who can afford to play hockey and take swimming lessons, and it will be gate kept as such. It's not a public facility either, but a lot of public money and interest is going into it.
Yeah, and I mean, to give them their due, there was the Friends of Morrow Park um, group there for a while. I believe they're still in existence, but yeah, it's
Right.
unfortunate because a lot of this was just like it was kind of all approved at a time when I wasn't um, covering. Well, it wasn't my job to cover city politics, and I wasn't really living in Peterborough or as focused on it as much as I am now. Um, but yeah, it's yeah, I can't really wrap my head around the twin pads. I think that'll take a little while to actually see it, try to make it make sense, but I really don't get the impetus to build a twin pad arena directly beside the Memorial Center down the street from Healthy Planet um arena. Um I don't know. It strikes me as very, very strange. In a lot of different ways, because I think there is like a serious need for like more green space and community space in Peterborough. And I again, yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
It does also seem like one of those things. Like I've played softball in Morrow Park, and the facilities were like very poorly maintained, and it felt like it could use, even in a very natural way, some beautification to get people to use the park and get them out there. Um it seems like one of those things where it's like, oh, we're just gonna like let this go, and then that way, because now that it's like not a beautiful park and it's not very well maintained, we can justify people not using it in order to get what we want
Yeah.
from the developer standpoint. So it kind of goes, to me, it kind of feels like it's along those trends that we see. Someone in chat is saying that Friends of Morrow Park still exists on Facebook, and Nicole McDonald is spearheading it. So maybe as this issue comes to a head, maybe we can even like try to talk to Nicole or someone from Friends of Morrow Park about it. Um, because yeah, I agree with you. Protecting green space and community space is really important.
Yeah. And
Um,
like allowing people to have an opportunity to go to that area of town without having to go to like a Pete's game or something like that. Like as someone who lives downtown, I don't really have any reason to go to Lansdowne at all. Okay.
yeah,
But if there was a park, I might be more inclined,
yeah,
I don't know.
it's true. I
I'm
mean,
just a
there's,
shameless urbanite who doesn't like to drive, so
yeah, well, that is good. And I mean, as someone who, like, I'm part of a collective of people who are interested in farming, and we need
mhm.
more space too,
Yeah.
and like it's potentially an initiative that could happen at Lansdowne, in addition to, I mean, right now we're based out of Trent University. So obviously those are very far apart in terms of Peterborough, but it would be nice to get more people involved in agriculture. And if there was, let's say, a bunch of community gardens there, because there's so
Yes.
much land,
Yeah.
that would be a great reason for people to go to Lansdowne.
Yeah, absolutely.
And and
Absolutely.
and build community around something that we all need, which is food,
Yeah.
right? So, I'm a believer in like agriculture as activism as well. So it's just like, to me, it's disappointing. As someone points out, there is like a legal challenge that is being launched, I think, against from the descendants of I believe it's James Morrow, or whoever the park is named after. Um so I guess, something that we'll keep an eye on. We should
Absolutely.
get into our last story. Speaking of having community space, there was
Yes.
another wonderful article written in the Kawartha Now website by somebody named Sebastian Johnston-Lindsay. And it's I can see here that it's got 710 shares.
Yeah, it kind of blew up a little bit. Uh
Wow. How
yeah.
come you can't be doing this type of work for the Arthur?
I try. I try. I think Kawartha Now just has little bit more pull in the community. I don't really know what they're doing. I have to get the secret, but yeah,
No, that's great.
it made for a busy weekend for some of the counselors I'm given to understand. Because yeah, so like the cliff notes of this is that basically there are community initiative grants that are given out each year. They have been for a number of years now, and previously they're given out for all the part of the problems that arise. And I think the larger overarching story is that Peterborough needs to reconsider how it funds the arts and how those decisions are being made, specifically through the formation of different committees, right? Because what's ended up happening here is because the grants are given out for everything from sports, heritage and culture, arts, a large umbrella of different things that are being funded through the same program, right? And it's being allocated through a citizens committee with two co-chairs who are city councilors. So in this instance, Councillor Keith Riel and Councillor Alex Burke. There's been a lot of criticism coming from some rather prominent folks within the arts community as to how these are being distributed, and the impetus for this criticism this time around, because this isn't the first time that these concerns have been raised, was the fact that the Theatre on King, so a community space, a Black Box Theatre on King Street in Peterborough, was had gone from the highest funding tier of $15,000 last year in 2022 to receiving zero funding from this program this year. And so a lot of questions are being raised about how this can happen, right? And I spoke to Sue Dida from the Electric City Culture Council, who said, like, in all of her 40 plus years of working in arts funding and arts councils and program development along these lines, that she's never seen someone go from the highest tier of funding one year to receiving nothing the next year. And her overarching concerns that arise out of this are, that puts artists and artistic spaces in even more precarity than they already are, right? So it's concerning on that front, right? And like Councillor Alex Burke, when I talked to him on Friday afternoon, he understands the fact that, and I think he would agree, that there needs to be a reconsideration. He said this at council last week or 2 weeks ago now too, speaking directly to the fact that there has to be a reconsideration of how these grants are being funded and how they're being distributed and who is adjudicating them, right? Yeah, so that's the main story. I mean, the really unfortunate thing is that the Theatre on King at this point looks like it's not going to be receiving any funds. They're planning on appealing it. The last time I spoke to Kate Story, who is one of the two directors at the Theatre on King, she said that's still the plan, but that remains to be seen exactly, because unless city council can come up with more money, then the only other option would be stripping funding from other deserving groups who did receive funding from this round of applications. So sticky story, but I think the major takeaway is that Peterborough needs to reconsider how it distributes arts funding and how those applications are being adjudicated.
Yeah, it's really tricky because there's a limited amount of resources, obviously. I think it was like 168,000, about that, 169,000. So to 20 not for profit and charitable organizations, and 20 or 8 organizations for like smaller community projects. So yeah, it is quite shocking. And unfortunately, as a result of this, like, the Theatre on King, also called Tea Talk, is saying that they might not be able to continue on without this funding. And yeah, as someone who is also involved with the arts community, it's really hard to develop these like business models where you're focused on creating great art while also trying to make enough money to get by. Literally, one of my jobs is to manage one of the theaters in town, and it's really difficult to keep everyone happy and on the same page, whether you're like the owners of the business or the staff or the people booking the space or the artists who want to do shows. You know, there's really limited money to go around. And you know, part of the problem is that, you know, the price of beer has gone up so much over time, and people are now willing to pay, I don't know, $10 for a beer. But the price of tickets has pretty much remained the
And
same. People still only want to pay $10 for a ticket to get into a show.
yeah.
You know, but really these shows should be costing, they should be going along the same price as inflation has throughout
Mhm.
the years as well.
Yeah.
So, you know, definitely one of the problems is just like how we stigmatize art and we don't really value it in society as well. But at the same time, you know, art is all around us and it's helped us get through the pandemic, even if that just means watching Netflix, or it's going to also be the thing that heals us through the great traumas that we have faced collectively, like as a through the pandemic. So, you know, I definitely cannot emphasize enough like how important it is to like fund these arts. And when they say 169,000 something dollars, that's like nothing. That is like, to me, that money will go so fast. And even $15,000 to reframe the highest amount, that like that is like what, half of one of the salary of the director. You know,
Mhm.
like that you will burn through that money so quick. It sounds like a lot because we think about $15,000 falling into our lap, but once you have to divide that money up and allocate it to like the resources that you need, it just like it's like it'll burn faster than Little Lake with an oil spill. So like yeah.
You read my
Um
mind. Yeah.
yeah, and
Yeah.
you know, it's really sad that you know, we are not funding these things, whether it's art or transit. These things that, yeah, they're not going to make money for the city, but they
No.
are essential to our well-being,
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
it's sad.
Yeah. And I mean, I really wish that, yeah, like that is the thing, right? It's like, oh, you hear it all the time at council. Oh, we need to be fair to the taxpayer and the taxpayer. But like the people who utilize these services are taxpayers too. You know, like I think that might sometimes be lost, a lot of these things. And I mean, not everything has to be viewed through um this money making, um profit driven lens. Like certain things like transit and should not be viewed as like a making profit. It's a service that needs to be provided for by people, uh, who are in
Yeah.
charge of ensuring that the services are available for people living in the community who are taxpayers, right? And like in the arts, the craziest thing about the arts not being viewed through that lens is they do drive so much um economic productivity in our community, right? Like we cannot, like there are people who come to Peterborough to live here specifically because of the art scene, and so to not allocate greater funding for them is actively working against one of the main drivers. Like it outstrips sports by a wide margin, right? In terms of generating economic productivity in our community. And so investing in the arts, you're going to get way more back. And I mean, I don't like talking in those terms because I think that art should just be, you know, produced because and funded because it's just good. It's just a good thing. But I mean, even if we have to appeal to the people who will want to view it through that, to appeal to that narrative, then like yeah, it's a no-brainer. Like it should just be done. And so this is definitely like the beginning of a developing story in terms of like how the city is going to like reconsider its means of funding the arts and how much it's willing to allocate. I mean, there's earlier in the year, like the council during the budget negotiations, like there's going to be um $50,000 per year put forward for individual artist grants, moving forward, and that's on a 3-year basis, and that's again in response and building off of pandemic era initiatives to ensure that local artists were being funded at least nominally through the pandemic. So there is a drive. Now those are different than like group grants, like such as what we saw here, but there's there's certainly some kind of interest, at least from certain members of council, to kind of give greater municipal funds to arts. Yeah, which is
Yeah.
important. And I think that one of the best things that could come out of this is like an actual council within Peterborough, to kind of like EC3, maybe giving an arm's length council the power to distribute municipal funds would be a better way of of adjudicating these applications, rather than just a citizens committee. And that's not to take away from the work of the citizens committee, right? Like and I don't think, and I would hope that people aren't going to like be angry at them for doing the work that they did, because I mean they're volunteers who are taking this on their own time. But the extent to which, like for example, myself, if I was asked to adjudicate the merits of like a sports based application, or like a small business proposal, I wouldn't feel comfortable doing that. I have no expertise in that, right? I'm not an entrepreneur. I have no business background, right? But
Yeah.
so to expect someone from the other side with very little understanding of how arts are funded and how they utilize this money and how it actually produces economic growth, that's a different story, right? Yeah, the other thing that's concerning about this is because Theatre on King has received funding from the city previous to this. Essentially, what this means, if again we're going to view it through the lens of like an investment, like you're basically just giving up on an investment at this point if you're going to cease that funding, right? Like it's not as if you give someone a little bit of money every year and then you cut it off and just expect them to be able to continue going, right? Like it's
Yeah.
an ongoing thing, right? Like things are not built to last within 2 or 3 years, right? Like it takes time. Again, here's my mantra: everything happens slowly. Right?
Yes.
But to just cut it off, you're pretty much ensuring that you know bad things are going to transpire in terms of the health and vitality of the Theatre on King is the example in this instance. But yeah.
That's why I did frame it in my tweet yesterday, asking questions and telling people what we're talking about as defunding the Theater on
Yeah.
King, because it essentially is, right? And
Yeah.
it's crazy to me because not only are we right because art is beautiful and it makes life meaningful and it helps heal us from our trauma and come together as a community, but we also are right because, as you say, it drives the economy as well, right? So there's literally like every good reason we have is to invest in arts. And I don't know why, but because when the police ask for more money every year, I mean, if our listeners don't know by now that I might be abolitionist, they might be getting those vibes. But we do invest in police. We give them whatever they want. But then when our other investment here, the arts, is asking for the same amount as last year, we
Mm-hmm.
we say, well, you've had your time in the sun, and you might have to disappear now. Unfortunately, what I feel like is going to happen, because as you say, the only way they're going to get the money is if they take it away from other groups, is that we will have to have a GoFundMe
Mm-hmm.
through the community, and in addition to paying our taxes, we will have to also support local art in that way, which I agree with doing, but I also think that this is just, we can't just have a GoFundMe for everything. We got way too many systemic problems. We can't just go fund ourselves the way out of it. One other shocking thing that I saw was that Councillor Riel said that this is the first year I have seen some really poor applications written. There was almost an expectation that the city was going to give them money. And I felt like this was potentially directed at the Theatre on King, although in the context of the Examiner article, it might have just been framed that way. However, I also think you don't have to say that, like that there were some really poor applications.
Yeah. No,
Like
no, he didn't mean to
who
say that.
because literally everyone who didn't get an application or didn't get some funding will think, oh, is he talking about my application? And that's just like, that's why would you say that? Like, it doesn't help the situation at all. So
Yeah. Yeah. No,
very
for
weird.
sure. Very, very odd. There's a lot more to say about this for sure, but yeah,
Well, but there's always next week because
always
we
next
are running
week.
out of
We
time.
can follow it up
We
next
did
week.
have one question, not really a question on Twitter, but it's someone who wanted us to talk about eliminating racism and the ongoing housing deprivations. I mean, I don't know if there's much we can talk about. Obviously, we support eliminating racism. I think if we could, would you like to eliminate racism, Sebastian? If you could do that for
I
us,
I would love to. Yeah.
that'd be great.
Um, do it. Doing my best day to
Yeah.
day.
And
Um,
ongoing housing deprivations, you know, and in a way, like a lot of these things that we talk about, housing and funding the arts,
mhm.
there's a lot of other politics that go on within those communities as well. And I know that often the people who get funding for the arts, they tend not to be indigenous folks here in Peterborough, and that appropriation and potentially misallocation of funds, you know, sometimes to me it's just like there's not a big enough pie to go around. And so no matter what, people are going to feel left out. And I just wish we could have $1 million worth of arts funding and we could fund all of these beautiful things to make a vibrant city that is full of diversity. And you know what? And then I would have a reason to take the bus downtown because there's all these amazing things happening.
And you could take the
Um,
bus downtown.
and I could, exactly, yeah, you
It
know.
would be
So,
funded.
and the last thing too is this is No Go Shelter Quay, our friend Mukwa, who's been on my show before. Just wanted to give a shout out to the Tweak Easy Coburg launch.
Yes, it's very exciting.
Yeah, which is really exciting. Tweak Easy is a safe consumption site that has gone on
Mhm.
in Peterborough, run by Mukwa and their organization Tweak Easy. So Tweak Easy, as far as I know, is the only safe consumption site that also allows for inhalation.
Yep.
So it's exciting for them to be opening. They're going beyond Peterborough now, and they have a Coburg location. I believe they operate one evening a week, and they allow for that safe consumption. And in a
Yep.
way, like they have served the community outside of any official capacity for a long time. They even have, like, what I understand, like a truce with the police, that if Tweak Easy is going on, the police don't come and police them. Um,
Yeah.
so it is an amazing initiative that they have done there. The last thing we have to talk about too is drama.
Drama. Yeah, we can talk about drama.
Okay, so
We can
very
talk about drama.
quickly, it's not really drama. It's actually really important stuff, right? Is
It
that
is.
essentially there was a libelous campaign against the Arthur newspaper, of which we both work for. Um, and you've probably heard some of the claims that were being made, but they go so far as, you know, somebody was let go unjustly. There's Arthur is not taking the 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 rights of disabled folks seriously, and also that some queer folks had used the F slur in their writing. All of this has been properly debunked or addressed, I feel like, by the Arthur and also myself in my own video.
Yeah.
But there has been
We
finally a
name dropped you.
resolution. Yes, when you,
Ran.
yeah, when I was the only person name dropped. It's like, hey, the only person who didn't get a raise,
Was
because
Danny
one of
Taro.
yeah, it's like, oh, thank you for publishing my name and how little I get paid. Like, I'm glad my mom can see this now that you know, it's like, and yeah, for some reason I got name dropped in that. But I think one of the allegations was that the levy increase that Arthur received from the students of Trent University was not going towards paying students more money. And the reason I got name dropped was because I'm the only person who's not a student, and I'm the only person who did not receive an increase in their wage, which is, in my opinion, very modest. And, you know, it is a labor of love more than it is a labor of making money, in case you can't tell. And this is the point where we say go to trentarthur.ca/donate
Yes,
to
please,
fund
please.
independent journalism. But anyways, Sebastian, there was a resolution to all of this libelous propaganda that was trying to defund the Arthur.
Yeah, so after numerous meetings, both official and unofficial, with members of the Levy community, so like official Levy groups, specifically Trent Radio, so Rob Howman and Jill Staveley at Trent Radio, kind of spearheaded, um, not a counter campaign, but basically called the TCSA to task for not following their bylaws. And then I had previously done this in other meetings, but they obviously they have no interest in listening to what Arthur has to say. That was made very, very clear. And so from then on, neither Bethan or I, so the editors of Arthur, really spoke during these meetings. We just kind of allowed it to be said from other groups. And thankfully, we basically pushed for either the fact that there was a full-on board meeting of the TCSA that a number of members of the Levy community, so for those who aren't involved in Trent, student groups and like Arthur and Trent Radio and Theater Trent and all these other a whole bunch of other groups form what we call like the Levy Council. It's kind of a ad hoc group of all the Levy receiving members of the Trent of Trent. So every undergraduate who takes a certain number of classes will pay a small fee to support these groups. Yeah, so a lot of them showed up to the TCSA meeting where we reminded them that they have bylaws that they should probably be following. They told us that they don't have to, more or less, because they never have. Their excuse was basically, well, we don't have to follow these bylaws because we haven't followed the bylaws in the past and it's been okay, as if that's somehow a defense. Imagine
I didn't realize the laws work like that.
Yeah, no, neither did I, right? When Wendy Walker was basically like yeah, no, I feel like I followed them as best as I could, and I made some tweaks here and there to them because I felt like I could, and I feel like it's okay, was basically her attitude throughout the whole thing until we called it. And so the board passed the there was a motion put forward by the TCSA executive to determine whether or not this should be held back a year as per their bylaws, because if there's any questions surrounding the legitimacy of a petition, their bylaws state that you need to delay it for a year and get third-party review and do all of these kinds of things. The TCSA executive decided that no, it's okay, we can break our bylaws again and put this forward to referendum. At which point, Rob Hillman and Jill Staveley at Trent Radio sent a call for an emergency Levy Council meeting, which was attended by the vast majority of the groups. And again, we went through the whole song and dance about TCSA has to follow their bylaws. The bylaws are not suggestions. Just reminding Wendy and everyone else that, she was the only person there from the TCSA there that day. That you have these bylaws for a reason. They've clearly been broken. Everyone can see that. So please, do the right thing here. And then later that night, so this meeting ended around 2 or 3 o'clock. I guess around 2 o'clock in the 2 or 3 o'clock in the afternoon. It doesn't really matter. Sometime mid-afternoon. And at around 11 o'clock at night, all the Levy community members got an email saying, yeah, we got third-party review from Student Affairs. Bear in mind, Lawrence Lamb, the acting VP of Student Affairs, is on vacation currently, so we're not quite sure who they got to review these. We got third-party review from Student Affairs, and we were 7 signatures short, so it's not going to go to referendum. And so that was it. So that was the conclusion. Now this adds a lot of different questions, right? And I mean, I just want to make it very clear. I don't care why they took it off. If they want to tell themselves it was because they lacked 7 signatures, that's fine with me. That's 100% fine. The truth of the matter is they were breaking their own bylaws very, very openly, and they got called on it. And then suddenly, within 6 hours or so, they had a third-party review and found they were 7 signatures short. That's fine. But I feel like this definitely isn't over, and that this demonstrates serious reasons to be very, very vigilant when overseeing the conduct of the TCSA and every other levy group. I mean, the TCSA tends to forget that they are a levy group themselves and are subject to the same sorts of oversights from the rest of us.
I assume that they are the levy group that gets the most funding.
Oh, yeah, by far. Yeah,
Okay,
I
yeah.
think they receive about $80 from every student
Okay.
per year. Yeah. So yes, they're the largest levy group, and because of this, kind of see themselves as the arbiters of the rest of the levy community, which they're
Mm,
not. Nowhere, anywhere does it say that they have any power besides the fact of running referendums. This is the only thing that they have, and if they can't do that properly, then that's concerning for every single member of the levy community. And
mm.
yeah, but I mean, this isn't over, and it's not. What this also revealed too is that this isn't an Arthur versus TCSA event. This is a TCSA versus their own bylaws, frankly, but then also in another sense, it's the TCSA like, overarching questions. Can they read their own bylaws and follow them? The answer is no. But it's also set the TCSA up in opposition to a lot of the levy groups who now fear for their own um, safety, basically,
Libelous
right?
defunding. Yeah.
Yeah, like if any student has anything wrong, I mean, this transpired, it came up that uh the Yes Shelter had been facing a similar campaign. And what's interesting about that is the TCSA actually offered to meet with representatives of Yes Shelter, whereas they never actually offered to meet with or inform Arthur of any steps moving forward, something which Wendy tried to say that she did, but if we have the emails, they don't go anywhere. So those were read aloud in the meeting and kind of demonstrated the fact that no, in fact, there had been no follow-up, there had been no information. And frankly, like, even if there had been, it was obvious on its face that the bylaws had not been followed, which is our primary concern. We don't want students to feel like they can't raise concerns about Arthur and run a campaign, but that campaign needs to be, you know, in good
Right.
faith and not based on lies, you know.
Yes.
So
This is like the
ultimately,
TCSA is going through like their Donald Trump era. There's like it's fake news.
oh, 100%. It's almost laughable the extent.
Defund.
Yeah, it's almost
Yeah.
laughable the extent to which they're like ripping pages out of the conservative and Republican playbook in terms of the way that they're treating, willful spread of misinformation and just absolving themselves of any fault in stopping or any role in stopping its spread. Right? Um, it's wild. It's absolutely wild. It's disheartening, and they ended up doing the right thing for a
Kind
reason that
of.
in the end,
Yeah.
right? Like
Yeah.
I,
Yeah.
I, I feel like there's a
The
lot of
right thing
there's a lot
for
of
very weird reasons. Like they didn't really arrive to like the necessary self-reflection. It's like, why are we doing this? Why are we breaking our own bylaws? Why are we
yeah,
trying to defund other levy groups in
yeah,
bad faith?
yeah,
But like they did the right thing out of because maybe they saw the writing on the wall though, that it wasn't going to end well for them.
yeah. And I mean, it was put forward by Rob Hillman again. Like at a certain point, Bethan and I just stopped talking in these meetings, right? And we were very, very thankful for one of our board members, Evan Robinson, a very notable journalist in our own right, for Arthur, right? Who was extremely well spoken and uh,
Yeah.
laid down what was factual throughout all of this. But then Rob Haleman also, outlined a number of the outcomes of this, and at one point he boiled it down to like at the end of the day, what this is one corporation attacking another corporation, right?
Hmm.
And spreading and abiding by libel, right? So that doesn't end well. That doesn't end well for anybody, right? And we don't
Yeah,
want
which
that.
is it sounds to me like it's like, hey, like we'll be able to sue you for this in a way. Like
Well,
that's kind of what that statement implies, is it
yeah,
not? Is like,
yeah,
yeah.
yeah. That
So
there could have been like legal ramifications, and I mean that's the last thing on my mind that I
yeah,
want to do. I have so
nobody
many better
wins
things to
from
be
that.
doing. Nobody
Yeah.
wins, no. And so I mean, I think when it was put forward in such a way that it was obvious that not only had everyone caught on to what the TCSA were doing, but that it didn't end well for anybody and it didn't look good for anybody. They did the right thing for reasons that they can tell themselves that to sleep at night, but I have
Sure.
reservations. I have
Yeah.
reservations about the reasoning behind it. 7 signatures is a little, lucky number 7. That's what I keep saying. It was a lucky number 7.
Sure.
You know?
Well, I look forward to reading about this one day in the Arthur.
Yeah. We haven't even begun to like actually, because there's so much that I probably shouldn't be saying on this, but
Fair. Yeah, save it for the
there's a
save it
lot.
for the paper. Yeah.
Yeah, there's a
All
ton.
right. Well, we definitely went over time, which is the
Yeah.
other theme of our podcast. In addition to politics moving very slowly,
Yes.
we might have made a new meme this week about Little League being set on fire, which seems to be the funniest thing to come out of this. And we just really want to thank everyone for listening. It's been a journey, I think, so far. I think we're getting really like good at it, to toot our own horns here. But I really appreciate this even for myself, because it helps me kind of inform myself so I can inform others and not appear to be like an idiot next to someone who knows what they're doing, and that's you, Sebastian. So thank you also so much for your time. This is
Absolutely.
the Peterborough Politics Podcast.